Namaste and welcome to Daily News Simplified, the what, why, and how of newspaper reading.
Now we would be analyzing the Delhi edition of the Hindu newspaper of 1st of February 2019, and the news that would be covered today is given on the screen, and the timestamp for the same is given in the description and the comment section given below. And so now with this, let us start with the first article. Now we have taken this lead editorial from the editorial page on page 8. Now what has happened is that the government of India in 2018 has decided to set up three new agencies. First called the Defence Cyber Agency, the second being the Defence Space Agency, and the third being the Special Operations Division. Now these three agencies have been set up by the government of India so as to handle the emerging disruptive technologies which have emerged in the defense and security field. Now within that context, what we're going to understand from this article is first what has happened. The second aspect that we're going to understand is what are disruptive technologies. And the third and the final aspect that we're going to understand from this article is the impact on India from the emergence of these disruptive technologies. Now you should see this article first from the perspective of GS paper 2 within the section International Relations and within the subsection Effect of Policies and Politics of Developed and Developing Countries on India's Interest. And secondly, you should mainly see this article from the perspective of GS paper 3 within the section Security and within the subsection Role of External State and Non-State Actors in Creating Challenges to Internal Security of India. So now let us first understand as to what is the context of this article. Now, as you already know, the Government of India has decided to set up three new agencies. First being the Defence Cyber Agency, the second being the Defence Space Agency, and the third being the Special Operations Division. Now, the formation of these three new agencies is based on the recommendations which has first been given by the Naresh Chandra Task Force, and secondly, also the recommendations given by the Chief of Staff's Committee. Now, what both of them has suggested is the formation of three new separate joint commands. Now, what this means is that there are three main divisions within the Indian military, first being the Army, the second the Navy, and third being the Air Force. Whereby what would happen is that the Army, the Navy, and the Air Force would jointly look after cyber, space, and special operations security. Now, it is yet to be seen as to how the Defense Cyber Agency, the Defense Space Agency, and the Special Operations Division is formed with regards to the joint commands. Now, the author in this article talks about on how cybersecurity, security within space, and security with regards to special operations is immediately required in India so as to deal with security threats that have emerged from new age technologies. And therefore, this brings us to the second aspect of this article as to what are the challenges for India that have emerged from these new age technologies. Now, the main new age challenge which the author has highlighted in this article is that high tech innovations in technologies are going to lead to disruptions in strategic stability. Now, when we talk about high tech innovations, it means technological innovations such as artificial intelligence, big data analytics, satellite jammers, hypersonic strike technology, advanced cyber capabilities, spectral denial, and high energy lasers. And according to the author, high tech innovations within these fields are going to lead to disruptions in strategic stability. Now, an example of this is the conflict between the United States and Russia. Now, as you already might be aware of, there is an ongoing investigation within the United States with regards to the involvement of Russia in the election of Donald Trump as the President of the United States. Now, you have to understand that the United States has a much better military capability than Russia, wherein it has more nuclear weapons, more submarines, and better technological capabilities in missile strikes. Apart from this, the United States also has the support of its European allies against Russia. Now, what this means is that the United States has a much better strategic capability than Russia. However, with help of technological innovations, Russia used advanced cyber capabilities to hack the elections of the United States and thereby compromise the democracy of United States. And what this means is that irrespective that United States has better strategic capability than Russia, Russia was able to use high-tech innovations in technology challenge the dominance of the United States. Similarly, if any country is able to hack the EVM machines within India through advanced cyber capabilities, then this would be one of the new age challenges to Indian security. And it is within that context that the author is saying that various technological innovations, such as in artificial intelligence, will lead to disruptions in strategic stability, whereby such high tech innovations would allow countries such as Russia, China, and others to counter countries such as the United States, which has a better military capability. Another example of this is, let's say, in the northeast, and especially in Arunachal Pradesh, where India is in conflict with China. If China was able to use satellite jammers so as to block any form of communication from the people of Arunachal Pradesh with the rest of India, then even though India, which has a higher military capability in Arunachal Pradesh, then India has to improve its military capability so as to handle this new age challenges with regards to technological innovations. And it is within that context that the author has said that there is an immediate need in India to develop suitable command and control, as well as doctrinal concept for the effective usage of technological innovations in keeping India secure. Whereby what the government of India has done is form the Defense Cyber Agency, Defense Space Agency, and the Special Operations Division as a form of command and control over the field of cybersecurity, space security, and special operations security. But according to the author, what is currently required is for these new agencies to be immediately formed, and they should be formed based on the actual recommendations which have been given by the Naresh Chandra Task Force and the Chiefs of Staff Committee. Apart from this, the author is also highlighting that India should also form doctrinal concepts on how these technological innovations, such as artificial intelligence and others, would be used in the sphere of military. So let's say for an example, there's a huge cyber attack on India's banking system. Now would such cyber attacks be called an act of war? Or if China, which currently does have capability of shooting satellites in space, and if China does indulge in shooting one of the military capable satellites of India, then according to the author, what would be the response of India? And it is within that context that the author is saying that doctrinal concepts are required to be formed in India so that we can effectively counter any form of new age challenges. Whereby, as you already might be aware, India does have a nuclear doctrine. And under this nuclear doctrine, India does have a policy of no first use, whereby India would only launch nuclear weapons against another nuclear state if that country has first launched nuclear weapons against India. Now, this is what is called a doctrinal concept with regards to security, and specifically with regards to security with nuclear weapons. And it is within that context that the author is saying that India should form doctrinal concepts with regards to other forms of new age challenges, such as cyber attacks, satellite attacks, among other. Now, with regards to these new age challenges, the author has highlighted various impacts on India. Whereby the first impact that the author has highlighted is that it makes India's cyber and digital enabled systems vulnerable to cyber attacks. Whereby we've already understood in an example that if there is a cyber attack against India's banking system, then the newly formed Defense Cyber Agency should be able to handle and counter this cyber attack. The second impact, which has been highlighted by the author, is that these new technologies can be used to deliver a disarming attack on India's strategic asset. Whereby, let's say for an example, that India recently launched the INS Ariant, which is part of India's nuclear triad. Now, for India's Nuclear Command Authority to communicate with INS Ariant, a communication space satellite is being used. Now, according to the author, if China is able to attack this satellite, then this attack on India's satellite can render India's Nuclear Command Authority as being ineffective. The third impact, which has been highlighted by the author, is that China has emerged as a key actor in the field of emerging military technologies. Whereby what the author is highlighting is that China is making various strides in the field of artificial intelligence, advanced cyber capabilities, satellite jammers, and high energy lasers. And all of these technologies can enable China to have an upper hand across India-China border. Now, the fourth and the last main point, which has been highlighted by the author with regards to impact on India from new age technologies, is that it would provide the adversary or the enemy country an upper hand in a limited war scenario. Now, when we say a limited war scenario, an example of this is when a war is confined to a particular region or an area, whereby the Kargil war was a limited war, whereby it was mainly confined to the Jammu and Kashmir region. And it is within that context that the author is saying that these new age technological developments would provide the enemy country an upper hand in a limited war scenario. Whereby, let's say if India and China are fighting in Arunachal Pradesh, then by using spectrum denial methods, whereby Indian troops are not able to communicate with their command authority, it would give China an upper hand in this limited war scenario. Similarly, the use of high energy lasers to target aircrafts of the Indian Air Force can also give the adversary an upper hand in a limited war scenario. And it is within that context that the author is saying that these technological innovations, such as in the field of artificial intelligence, spectrum denial, and high energy lasers, should be used within India, whereby this upper hand should be provided to Indian troops in a limited war scenario. And for this, a proper functioning of the Defense Cyber Agency, the Defense Space Agency, and of the Special Operations Division is required within India. And these new agencies should also have coordinations with Army, Air Force, and the Navy. So now hopefully you've understood the three main aspects from this article. And so now with this, let us move on to the next article. Now we have taken this article from page 1. Now as you already might be aware of, a national newspaper business standard with regards to NSSO's periodic labor force survey. However, what has happened is that the Niti Aayog has said that this report which has been released by the business standard is not correct. And therefore what is currently necessary is that we need to wait for the periodic labor force survey of NSSO to be released by the government of India. However, up till then, what we can do is understand as to what is the periodic labor force survey which is conducted by NSSO. Now, this survey is required to be understood from the perspective of GS Paper 3 within the section Economic Development and within the subsection Issues Relating to Employment. Now, apart from this, you should also understand about the periodic labor force survey with regards to your upcoming prelims examination of 2019. And this is because in the prelims examination of 2018, a question has been asked with regards to a survey by NSSO. And therefore, with regards to this, let us understand about the periodic labor force survey. Now, what we're going to understand are various facts about the periodic labor force survey, and you need to remember them, especially with regards to your upcoming prelims examination of 2019. Now, this periodic labor force survey is conducted by the National Sample Survey Office, which is under the Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation. The second point that you need to remember is that earlier the Labor Bureau used to conduct as to what was called the Annual Employment Unemployment Survey. However, what happened was that on recommendations of Dr. Arvind Task Force on Employment, the Annual Employment Unemployment Survey was replaced by the Periodic Labor Force Survey. And apart from this, earlier the Annual Employment Unemployment Survey was conducted by the Labor Bureau. However, this periodic labor force survey is now being conducted by the National Sample Survey Office. And it was recently in 2017 that this periodic labor force survey was conducted. But what has happened now is that the National Newspaper Business Standard has released the various information that was contained in this survey. But what is currently happening is that the Niti Aayog has said that this information which has been released by Business Standard is not correct. And therefore it is required for us to wait for the periodic labor force survey to be released by the Government of India. Now, this periodic labor force survey is conducted in a continuous or a regular manner. Now, it is conducted on a quarterly basis for the urban sector and an annual basis for both rural and urban sector. Now, in some places, it would be written that the periodic labor force survey is conducted on an annual basis only for the rural sector. However, you have to understand that even though the urban sector survey is conducted on a quarterly basis, its report is also released on an annual basis, as similar to the report of the rural sector. This next point that you need to remember is that this periodic labor force survey is provided at both state and all India level. The fifth point that you need to remember about this survey is that it uses two approach. First is called the usual status approach and second is the current weekly status approach. Now the main difference that you need to remember between both of them is that the usual status approach takes into account 365 days while the current weekly status approach takes into account 7 days. Now the annual estimates for both the rural and the urban sector is generated on major parameters such as the labor force participation rate, the second being the worker population ratio, third being the unemployment rate, and apart from this, the annual estimate also gives distribution of workers in terms of industry, types of occupation, and an important aspect that you need to know is that this periodic labor force survey also gives data on the workers that are employed in the informal sector. And apart from this, it also provides data on the condition of employment of workers. And the last point that you need to know is that the quarterly estimate, which is only given for urban sector, is also generated on similar parameters as the annual estimates, such as the labor force participation rate, the worker population ratio, and the unemployment rate. Now, these are the 7 main points that you need to remember about the periodic labor force survey. Now, apart from this, you also understand that this news is also currently in transition, whereby let us wait and see as to what would be the observations that have been given out once the Government of India releases the periodic labor force survey report. But hopefully, you've understood the main points about this survey. And so, now with this, let us move on to the next article. Now, we have taken this article from page 13. Now, what this article talks about is that the core sector growth has been the slowest in 18 months. Now, it is not required for you to remember this data because the core sector data is given every month. However, what is required for you to understand from this is about the core sector itself. Now, we're going to understand about the core sector through a question answer format, whereby the first question has been taken from the prelims examination of 2012, while the second question has been taken from the prelims examination of 2015. Wherein the first question states that India in the overall index of industrial production, the indices of the 8 core industries have a combined weight of 37.90%. Now you have to understand that this weight has recently been changed, whereby the current weightage is 40.27%. Now since this is an old question from 2012, during that time the combined weight was 37.90%. However, now the 8 core industries have a combined weight of 40.27% in the index of industrial production. However, the question has asked which of the following are among those 8 core industries. The first is cement, second is fertilizer, third is natural gas, fourth is refinery products, and fifth is textiles. While the second question reads, in the index of 8 core industries, which one of the following is given the highest weight? Wherein the first option is coal production, the second is electricity production, the third is fertilizer production, and the fourth option is steel production. And what you need to do is pause this video, solve both of these questions, and wait for 5 seconds for the correct answer. Now the correct answer to the first question is C 1, 2, 3 and 4, whereby textile is not part of the 8 core industries. While with question number 2, option A, option B, option C and option D are all incorrect, whereby in 2015 it was the electricity generation which had the highest weight in the index of 8 core industries. However, what has happened now is that recently a change has been made in the calculation of the 8 core industries, and it is the refinery products which now have the highest weightage when calculating the index of the 8 core industries. Whereby if you take a look at this recent data report which has been given out, the refinery product have a weightage of 28%, while electricity, which has the second highest weightage, is around 19%. And therefore, if a question is again asked in your prelims examination as to which of the following has the highest weightage in the index of 8 core industries, then you should know that it is refinery products. And the second highest weightage is given to electricity. Now, the next two questions for practice with regards to the core sector are, whereby the first question reads, consider the following statements on the index of 8 core industries. Whereby the first statement reads, it is a monthly production index released by Ministry of Finance. The second statement reads, it is the lead indicator of the monthly industrial performance. Which of the statements given above is correct? While question number 2 reads, which of the statements about index of 8 core industries is correct? Whereby the first statement of question number 2 reads, the base year used for calculation is 2011 and 12. The second statement reads, electricity generation does not include generation from renewable sources. And as you understand, what you need to do is pause this video, solve both of these questions, and wait for 5 seconds for the correct answer. Now the correct answer to the first question is B, 2 only, whereby the index of the 8 core industries is not released by the Ministry of Finance, whereby it is released by the Department of Industrial Policy and Promotion under the Ministry of Commerce. And with regards to the second statement, according to the Government of India, the index of 8 core industries is the lead indicator of the monthly industrial performance. Now, with regards to question number 2, the correct answer is A, 1 only, whereby the base year for calculation of the index of 8 core industries is 2011 and 12. However, with regards to statement number 2, electricity generation which is calculated in the index of 8 core industries does include generation from renewable sources. Whereby what had happened is that in 2014, a change was made with regards to the index of 8 core industries, and electricity generation from renewable sources was added when calculating the total electricity generation. And therefore, the correct answer to this question is A, 1 only. Now, hopefully, with the help of these 4 questions, you have understood all the important aspects that are required to be known about the core sector, especially with regards to your upcoming prelims examination of 2019. And so, now with this, let us move on to the next article. Now, we have taken this opinion based editorial from page 9. Now, as you already might be aware of, the Government of India intends to provide 10% reservation for the general classes, whereby the Government of India is going to provide 10% reservation both in education and in employment for individuals belonging to the forward classes, and these forward classes would also include the religious minorities. And it is within that context that this article has provided 3 perspectives. The first perspective supports this 10% reservation which has been given by the government. The second perspective is against this proposal for the Government of India to provide 10% reservation. And while the third perspective gives both positive and negative views with regards to this 10% reservation. Now you have to understand that various points within this article in all the 3 perspectives are highly political. But nevertheless, we're going to understand the points from this article which are in support of this 10% reservation. And after that, we're going to understand the various points which have been given in this article which are against this 10% reservation. So now let us first understand the arguments which have been given in support of this 10% reservation. Now, the first point in support of the 10% reservation is that economic backwardness has denied equality of opportunities to individuals in both in the field of education and employment. And because various individuals from the forward classes have been denied equal opportunity in the field of education and employment, they have not been able to achieve a decent and sustained livelihood. And therefore, according to the author, positive discrimination in the form of reservation can ensure the participation of economically weak forward classes in the field of education and employment. And this is one of the main points which has been repeatedly given as in support of 10% reservation for the forward classes, whereby there exists economic backwardness among the forward classes, and providing reservation in the field of education and employment is one of the means through which the economically backward people of the forward classes can be provided equal opportunity to achieve a decent and sustained livelihood. Now, one of the reasons given against the 10% reservation is the Indra Sohani case, whereby the Supreme Court in the Indra Sohani case had capped reservation at 50%. And apart from this, the Supreme Court had also said that reservation is only applicable for socially and educationally backward categories. And these backward categories are the scheduled castes, the scheduled tribes, and the other backward classes. And therefore, it is being said that providing reservation based on economic backwardness would go against the verdict which has been given by the Supreme Court in the Indra Sohani case. However, according to the author, the Supreme Court verdict in the Indra Sohani case does not apply in the recently given 10% reservation, whereby, according to the author, the Constitution has been amended with regards to Article 15 and Article 16. Now, what the government has done is amend Article 15 and Article 16 of the Constitution of India by adding the words economically weaker section. And this economically weaker section shall be notified by the state based on family income and other indicators of economic disadvantage. And therefore, according to the author, the Constitution has been amended to include economically weaker sections. Now, one of the reasons as to why reservation could not be provided on basis of economic backwardness was that economic backwardness was not a criteria given in the Constitution of India, whereby only socially and educationally backwardness was given as a criteria for providing reservation. However, according to the author, now that the Constitution has been amended to include economic backwardness, the Supreme Court verdict in the Indra Sohani case therefore does not apply. Now, these were the 2 main points which were not political in nature, which have been given as reasons in support of 10% reservation for the forward classes. Now, let us understand the arguments which have been given against providing the 10% reservation. Now, the first reason given against providing 10% reservation is that the Constituent Assembly of India did not provide the use of economic criteria as a mean for providing reservation, whereby the Constituent Assembly of India only provided educational and social backwardness as a mean for providing reservation within India. Now, according to the author, the Constituent Assembly was aware of the fact that economic backwardness is a hurdle for achieving social justice within India. But irrespective of this fact, they still did not provide economic backwardness as a mean for providing reservation within India. And therefore, according to the author, this 10% reservation violates the will of the Constituent Assembly. The second reason given in the article is that reservation does not create jobs. And according to the author, the government should focus on creation of jobs. And apart from that, the government should focus on creating opportunities for the forward classes to reach the newly created jobs. And according to the author, by providing reservation, it neither creates jobs nor provides an equal opportunity to the forward classes to achieve those jobs. Now, the third and the final reason given in the article against providing 10% reservation is that the Supreme Court had already said that reservation is not aimed at economic upliftment or poverty alleviation, and therefore trying for the economic upliftment of the forward classes by providing reservation based on economic backwardness would be violating the verdict of the Supreme Court, whereby the author has highlighted that the Supreme Court has said that economic weakness is an account of social backwardness, while the forward classes are not socially backward. However, it is yet to be seen as to what would be the view of the Supreme Court with regards to this 10% reservation, whereby several petitions have already been filed in the Supreme Court against providing this 10% reservation, and therefore the view of the Supreme Court on this 10% reservation is still awaited. However, hopefully you understood the three main points which have been given in the article against providing 10% reservation for the forward classes. Now, these are the few non-political points which have been provided in this article with regards to perspective on providing 10% reservation for the forward classes. And so now with this, let us move on to the next article. Now, the news that we're going to look at is the new Artic novel from page 12. Now, what has happened is that the polar vortex, which is found around the North Pole, has shifted southwards towards the United States. And what this has done is increase the coldest days within the United States and Canada. Now, there are two aspects that you need to understand from this article. First, as to what is a polar vortex. And the second aspect that you need to understand is how is a polar vortex linked to global warming. Now, you should see polar vortex from the perspective of GS Paper 1 within the section Geography of the World and within the subsection Important Geophysical Phenomena, while you should see the link between global warming and polar vortex from the perspective of GS Paper 3 within the section Environment. Now, with regards to understanding as to what is a polar vortex, what I'll do is provide you an animated video through which you can learn as to what is a polar vortex, whereby an animated video would give you a better visual representation of a geophysical phenomena. And through this video, you can understand as to what is a polar vortex. And so now with this, let us move on to the next article. Now, we have taken this article from page 13. Now, what this article talks about is that the Reserve Bank of India has allowed three public sector banks, which are the Bank of India, Bank of Maharashtra, and Oriental Bank of Commerce, to exit the prompt corrective action framework of the Reserve Bank of India. And the reason these banks have been able to leave the prompt corrective action of the Reserve Bank of India is because the government has infused a large amount of capital into these banks. And because of this capital infusion by the Government of India, there has been a decline in the non-performing asset ratio or the NPAs for these banks. However, what is required for you to understand from this article is what is provisioning. Whereby what the article is trying to highlight is that because there has been a capital infusion within these three banks, it has decreased the net NPA ratio for these banks. And because the net NPA ratio for these banks has decreased, they now have to put less amount of money as a provisioning requirement. And it is within that context that you should understand as to what is the provisioning requirement. Whereby what is currently happening is that the provisioning requirement continuously appears in the newspaper. However, it is yet to be asked in your prelims or your mains examination. And therefore what we're going to do is understand as to what is provisioning from the perspective of your upcoming prelims examination of 2019. Now, we have already discussed about provisioning from the Daily News Simplified video of 26th of October. Now, what I'll do is add this section of the video in today's DNS, and therefore we could revise and understand about provisioning from this news article itself. Now, you already understand that banks undertake both deposit and lending operations, and one of the aspects of these lending operations is the provision of loans. But what sometimes happens is that these loans are not repaid and thereby become non-performing assets or bad loans. And so when a loan becomes a non-performing asset or a bad loan, So now the bank which has taken the loss from the non-performing asset has to ensure that this loss is covered from other sources. So in simple terms, provisioning means that banks have to set aside an amount in order to meet these future anticipated losses. So what banks in India do is that out of the profits that they make, they have to set aside a certain percentage of amount as a provisioning requirement, and the percentage of amount that needs to be set aside is done as per the RBI norms. Now, if you take the example of the Yes Bank from this article, what had happened was that the NPA ratio was targeted to be at 1.35%. However, the actual NPA ratio for this quarter for Yes Bank was at 1.60%, and therefore there was an increase in the NPA ratio, which caused an increase in the provisioning requirement for Yes Bank. And this increase in the provisioning requirement for Yes Bank had to be taken out of the profit that Yes Bank made from other sources, and this led to a decrease in the final profit figures for Yes Bank for this quarter. So now hopefully up till here you've understood that an increase in non-performing asset or bad loans leads to an increase in the provisioning requirement. And apart from this, you also understand that an increase in the provisioning requirement for a bank decreases the final profit figures for that bank. And now the last aspect that you need to understand is that the provisioning requirement as per the norm of the Reserve Bank of India is considered as a prudential regulation norm, wherein in simple banking terms, the word prudential means of a controlled risk through adequate capital requirement. And hopefully with this you have understood as to what is provisioning. And so now with this, let us move on to the next article. Now there are two questions for your practice, whereby question 3 reads, consider the following statements with regards to provisioning. The first statement reads, prudential norms of provisioning was recommended by the Narasimha Committee. The second statement reads, provisioning should be made on the basis of the classification of assets for the period it has remained non-performing. Which of the statements given above is correct? Now the second question reads, consider the following statements with regards to equality. The first statement reads, equality of opportunity for public and private employment. The second statement reads, prohibition of discrimination on grounds of religion, race, caste, sex, or place of birth. And the third statement reads, provisions for positive discrimination for women and children. Which of the statements given above with regards to equality are prescribed in the Constitution of India? And as you already understand, what you need to do is pause this video, solve both of these questions, and wait for 5 seconds for the answer. Now, with regards to question number 3, the correct answer is C, both 1 and 2, whereby the prudential norms for provisioning was recommended by the Narasimha Committee. And with regards to statement number 2, provisioning should be made on the basis for the classification of assets for the period it has remained non-performing. Now, with regards to question number 4, the correct answer is B, 2 and 3, whereby statement number 1 is wrong, whereby equality of opportunity is only made for public employment, and this has been provided under Article 16, while statement number 2 and statement number 3 have been given in Article 15, whereby there is a prohibition on discrimination based on grounds of religion, race, caste, sex, or place of birth. However, under Article 15, Clause 3, it allows for the state to make special provision for women and children. And therefore, the correct answer to this question is B, 2 and 3. Now, as you already might be aware of, the budget has been presented today. And with regards to that, there would be many articles tomorrow that would appear in the Hindu newspaper with regards to the budget. Now, it is a recommendation. Please go through the basic concepts which have been provided in today's PDF, whereby these basic concepts would improve your understanding on how the budget is formed and would be very important with regards to your upcoming prelims examination of 2019. And apart from this, it would also help in understanding the various news that would be covered in tomorrow's Daily News Simplified, since most of the articles covered would be with regards to the budget.
And now with this, we come to an end in the analysis of today's newspaper. Now we move on to the question for today.